Randy, at first I just want to say that I enjoyed going to your room and listening to you teach. Um, let's review over what your goal was when we met and we were talking about your growth goal. Your goal was my 7th grade math students will be more engaged as assessed by their daily tickets out the door, and their grade on the 3rd benchmark assessment will increase by 20% during the 2014-2015 school year. So when we met the last time, this is what we talked about that you were really concerned about was your students' engagements and being engaged in class, and we were going to use those tickets out the door that you wanted to get more consistent with as being one of the ways that you were going to judge, you know, how engaged your students were. And you thought that the more, as you did the tickets out the door and those assessment grades improved, that you would see your students being more engaged. Also, you felt like by the time you did the 3rd benchmark, since they had been more engaged throughout the tickets out the door, that then the 3rd benchmark would show improvement. Is that what we agreed upon the last time?
That is correct.
All right. So I came in to view your classroom, and I used the student engagement checklist. So I just want to ask you a little bit about how you think everything went and get your thoughts on this. Going into this, what are your thoughts about the activity achieving your goal? How do you feel about your goal that we set?
I think it's attainable.
To have the students more engaged.
Yeah, definitely.
Initially, how did you see this as a problem? I mean, what is happening in your classroom that made you think that your students need to be more engaged?
Well, I just feel like that the students, after a certain point, they lose a little bit of interest in what we're doing and kind of wander off a little bit. So I've got to rope them back in and get them back engaged in the lesson to keep them up with me with what I'm trying to teach them.
I think when we interviewed the last time, you were saying your classes are an hour and a half long.
An hour and a half long.
And so in that hour and a half time, you feel like at some point you might be losing them.
Yes, at some point after we've sort of done our warm-up, our bell ringer situation, we've looked at the homework, and then we get involved in the lesson. I think all those transitions go pretty well, but once we get into the lesson, after 30 to 45 minutes, they're ready to transition to something a little bit different, either the same lesson at a different pace, or maybe some hands-on activity, a foldable such as that. So that's what I want to do, is just keep them engaged, keep them on the same page with me.
When I was in the room watching your lesson, what do you recall about your own behavior during that lesson?
I'm probably not the most exciting person to listen to, for the most part, but you know, I try to incorporate as many real life scenarios that I can with whatever we're trying to talk about, whether it be positive, negative integers and checking accounts, and just anything real life that we can come up with that'll kind of can get their attention maybe better than just looking in a book at a picture of pies or plates or whatever the lesson activities involving.
So, well, we'll come back to that, and we'll talk about ways that you think maybe you could get more exciting, or the ways you could entertain your students a little bit more. So we'll get back to that in just a little while. You know that we discussed that I was going to use the student engagement checklist to observe how I felt like your students were engaged. What were your thoughts about the checklist and the different areas that we checked off?
As far as how you assessed me, or how I felt about the observation tool.
How do you
to
feel
start
about
with.
the observation tool to start with?
The observation tool was fairly comprehensive. Covered a lot of things that I didn't necessarily realize that I was doing, or that were incorporated into my lesson. And a lot of the things that I saw were stuff that I try and use, but maybe I don't use it as effectively as I could.
So do you feel like if we continue this and we keep using this observation checklist, that it's going to provide essential data that will help you engage more students?
I think it will if I could just use it a little more effectively.
Looking at the information that I collected on this first observation, what do you make of it? What do you make of the information that I collected from our first observation?
Well, like I said, there's some stuff there that I didn't realize I was incorporating pretty well, but then I didn't realize that I wasn't incorporating some of the stuff on the checklist at all. When I really kind of thought I really wasn't. So
could you tell me one of those things?
Well, one of them is of course participation and keeping the students in the game with me, and how I get those students to participate with me.
I'm going to just take a few notes here because I want to come back to some of this. Participation. All right, keep going.
I've just got to come up with some more effective ways than show of hands and letting students raise their hand when they want to answer a question, and me maybe not being quite effective at calling on students that seem to may be a little bit lost in the forest with me.
I think that's awesome, especially that you picked up on that, because that was some of the things that I picked up on too when I did the checklist. So in just a little while we will talk about this. How do you, what were you aware of that your students were doing that signaled you that they may not be as engaged? What did the students do that sort of signaled that to you?
You kind of get a feeling when you're there and maybe you're the only one listening to yourself. Sometimes you just sort of preaching to the choir, seems like. But anyways, you kind of see them kind of look around, maybe start doodling on a piece of paper, accidentally pulling out an AR book and maybe starting to read on that.
And what would you normally do in a case like that when you saw that they were starting to be not as engaged as you would like?
Well, that's when they get my attention, and so then I give them my attention. So naturally, if I see a kid, it seems like he's veering off a little bit, I will redirect them and try and reconcentrate their focus on what's at hand.
What thoughts do you have to explain why some students stayed engaged and some students did not perform like you had hoped they would?
Well, that's probably the $64 million question. If I knew what kept those engaged, I would just can it and pull it out whenever I needed it. But
well, if you had to guess, what would you say? What would you say one of the motivations is for those students that stay engaged?
Probably because of some of the examples I use are kind of more familiar to them, like football games and football plays. Of course, that's going to grab the attention of my guys that play football, and then some of my guys' dads. I know them, and they're carpenters or roofers or whatever their skill is, and I try and, just like with slope, I try and involve my little roofer guy because he understands pitch and slope and understands that a little bit differently than some of the other kids do. But as far as knowing when one's engaged, the key to me to that is when they ask me a question, and I'm not the only one doing the question asking, but when they go a little bit further in their thought process than maybe I was at, and they ask me a question that was a little more involved, I pretty much know I've got that kid hooked for the time being, and so I'll try and carry that up and carry that on, and at least I know I'm helping one child. I may not be helping the whole class, but at least I know I'm involving that one student pretty in depthly.
So let's stay on that train of thought. You're saying that you know you can reach some of the children because you know their parents, what they do, what these students like. Can you take that a step further and tell me how you can see yourself bringing more students to be engaged in your class? What could you do that would bring more students?
Knowing more of their interest, knowing what they're interested in, maybe what they do on the side, like babysitting. I know some of the examples we were talking about in unit rate section that 2 or 3 of the girls babysit, and they never really thought about it as what are they making per hour, because they were just babysitting for a set fee, and they finally realized, hey, I'm making money just like my mom or dad does, and I'm getting paid by the hour, and I'm actually making about or more money than my mom or dad makes at their real job. And they just never thought about that. If they babysat for 2 nights and made $50, $60 and only worked about 4 or 5 hours, they realized they were making $8, $10 an hour. So it's pretty neat. And I just found that out accidentally, that they were babysitters, and that's pretty neat.
So
what I need to do is a little more of interviewing my students when I can, either at breakfast or at break or whatever time I can arrange to where I can sort of get a one-on-one basis to work from. They're not that hard to get information out of, such as that. It's pretty easy to kind of start trying to make a connection and find out what their interests are and what sort of will grab their attention. What we want to talk about. Well, how can I get in your interest instead of it always being something I'm interested in?
And do you see that as making yourself more accessible to them? They're going to be more open to you, and then they're going to want to do better for you in class.
That's clearly a connection, I see. When you get a kid thinking that you're really interested and you have a bona fide interest in how well they do on something, I know that for a fact.
You know, we set your grow goal, and we talked about some of the things that we were going to do to see if we could, get the engagement up in your classroom. But, we can always go back and modify that goal. And as we talk, I'm thinking that a good modification might be an activity to get to know these students better, and not just, a handful of them, but, to come up with a plan that we can get to know, the majority of your students better on a one-to-one basis. We can talk about that later. At the end, we'll talk about if you want to keep the goal the same or if you would like to adjust it at all. But that may be something you want to think about.
I definitely, I know that would work. I mean, something as simple as where'd you get that book bag or something like that. I've asked that question before, and they start talking about, well, we went shopping in Savannah, we went shopping in Macon, and you ask them a couple questions. Well, we shopped at Walmart, or we shopped at Macy's, or wherever, and you sort of get a feel for whether that student even likes to shop or not. And sometimes, what did you buy? How much were the taxes on it? How can you can just feed off of that, and it doesn't have to be in a classroom setting. I mean, I don't ever mind talking with a student, kind of sort of off the record, and just seeing what they know and making them realize that they actually know more than they really thought. Like if they bought the book bag on sale, they didn't really realize when they did that they were actually saving money because they weren't spending their money for one thing, but they would finally realize, well, why did we buy it on sale? Well, now I know why we bought it on sale. And sometimes they just don't make those connections in, they just see something they want, and maybe their parents are wiser at this than they are, and they want those to save that money if they can, so they buy something on sale. And they didn't, what I'm trying to get at, as a kid, really didn't realize why they were buying it on sale. They didn't.
Right.
Most of them that come to me have no idea what on sale means.
I smile because I know that we both just taught, since we teach the same subject, I know we both just taught a discount. And so I know when you're talking about going shopping, that provided you with a great opportunity to talk about whether or not it was on sale and how to figure a discount. And they didn't realize that they were going to get talk to you about math, but you probably incorporated a lot of math into that conversation too.
Absolutely. I make them pull out a piece of paper and tell me how much was the book bag before it went on sale, and how much did you actually save, and trying on some of them show them that they actually saved tax money too. It wasn't just the money on the item itself, but they saved money on taxes, and try and show them a relationship between the price of something and the tax savings due to a sale.
Are you satisfied right now with the progress that we're making towards meeting your goal? And remember, our goal was that we were going to increase the student engagement, and we were going to use the tickets out the door, as one of our guideposts. So are you fairly satisfied right now with the progress you're making in that area, or is it not what you expected as of yet?
Pacing and my timing is my biggest problem with being able to get those tickets out the door. Actually, today was third or fourth day of a new 9 weeks, and I actually paced it to where I could use a ticket out the door. And the kids were a little bit surprised because I don't use them consistently, and they're some of them noticed, well, you haven't done this for us in a couple of weeks, Mr. Carman. And I said, well, we're going to be doing a little bit more of it from now on. And they seem to enjoy it to a point. If you can enjoy a ticket out the door, they seem to like for me to know that they know what we talked about that day. They if you will, they sort of want to show off and let me know, I was listening to what you were talking about, and I did get a little bit of it, if not all of it. So
I think that goes
I
back.
think they're going to definitely see a change in my procedure as far as making sure I have time to get that ticket out the door done effectively and correctly.
I know when we had our interview, that was one of your concerns, is that you did teach to the bell many days, as many of us do in math. We get hung up on trying to take care of some of those misconceptions, some of the missing skills, and we end up teaching to the bell and missing our ticket out the door for that formative assessment to see what they learned that day.
Well, what I actually did today is I was watching the clock intentionally, and we had been working some problems, working them out on the smart board, and I saw my time was creeping away, so I eased back over to my podium, and I said, well, let's just answer let me just give you the answers to these questions and see if there's anybody that needs for me to work. One of them, if you have a problem with how I arrived at my answer, and make sure we've got the same answer. And so today it just worked out, but it wasn't easy, because I would have probably stood right there at that smart board until the bell rung, because I just enjoy working problems and showing them how to work a problem. But that's just something I've got to work on, is intentionally watching the clock, which I'm just not a clock watcher. I just when the bell rings, I know it's over with.
I know you had said during our interview that was one of the big things that you thought you needed to change, and you say you're working on that. the day that I came in and did the observation, what happened that day with the ticket out the door?
Well, it didn't happen is what happened with the ticket out the door. Of course, I'm not used to somebody staying in my class and observing me, and I was probably trying to impress them too, but I just didn't plan it appropriately. I mean, there's no excuse.
One of the things that I had thought about is that you have iPads in your room, correct? What do you think about maybe setting the timer on the iPad to go off maybe 10 minutes before the bell? And that would serve as a reminder to you?
Well, I thought about something else in the meantime. Nearly in all my classes, I have 2 or 3 pretty studious students, and I've always known in the past, if you give a kid a job, they're more than happy to oblige you. And so right now, that's what I'm thinking about, is having some assigned students to tell me, Mr. Cartman, it's time for us to do our ticket out the door, or have some kind of a cue to let me know that, I'm down to 5 minutes before time I need to do the ticket out the door. Of course, it's on my agenda, and the kids know it's supposed to be done, but a lot of times, because I just don't want to stop working problems, I just run out of time. So that's sort of what I was thinking. I guess that's sort of along the same track is you getting somebody to set a timer.
Oh, I think yours is even better. I think if you get a student to do that, I think that'll be awesome. I think you would be making a move towards achieving your goal. I think you would be involving a student.
That's what I'm sitting here thinking is that would definitely engage that student.
That would engage that student.
And it may not be that I need to get one of my students that are so studious. I may need to get me a student that's not quite so studious, and give him or her a little task, and they sort of feel a little bit special when you do that, especially ones that maybe have a little trouble focusing and staying in the game with you.
I think that would be a really good way that we can observe. I can observe and see how that works for you, but I think that will be a very good way for you to work towards achieving your goal. Can you think of any other ways that we can incorporate right now to help you achieve your goal?
Word it a different way, what you're asking me.
Well, we definitely need to get the tickets out the door. And we need to get them consistent, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that was what you wanted. You wanted to get consistent. And then once you see that consistency, you're thinking that that's going to make the engagement higher, which will in the end make their grades higher. Let's talk about grading those tickets out the door a little bit. Now, what are you thinking about there?
It's going to depend on what kind of a ticket out the door the assessment that I choose. Sometimes if it's going to be real informal, it's just going to be I scratch something down on a piece of paper and hand it to me. It may be just a thumbs up deal, a thumbs down. Write down what you didn't understand about the lesson. It's just going to depend on, I probably won't grade them per se and put them in the book. I don't feel like that would be fair. But let's say that if it's something I feel like they should have gotten and just was sort of a main point of the lesson, like a lot of times I'll tell them in class, if you don't remember or learn anything else but this, and that usually gets their attention, but that would be something like I would go back and re-question them about or reassess them. Did they really get it? Were they listening when I said, if you don't get nothing else but this? And they're pretty conscious of me saying that a lot. And I'll see a lot of them at that point get out their interactive notebook or a piece of paper, and they'll actually write it down. So, yeah, as far as grading them, I probably won't grade them. I'll probably use them just as an informal assessment to make sure they're getting the main idea of the lesson.
And will you change your instruction the next day?
and definitely if I see that there's confusion, even I had one write me a note today. I did not understand the last 4 problems that you did, and I said the last thing out the door. I said, well, we're going to go back and revisit a couple of those problems to make sure you got them, but I want you to redo them for me tonight for your homework. And so that way, you know, if what I've said today may clarify it, and if it doesn't, then I certainly need to go back and clarify what it is you're confused about.
Are there any resources that you need from me or from other teachers? Is there any kind of resources that you need that could help you achieve your goal?
I'd like to have anybody's ideas. If resources include just general ideas of what is the best ticket, and if there is a best ticket out the door. I'm sure it depends on what your subject matter you're covering is what the best ticket would be, whether it should be a actual word problem or just a thumbs up or thumbs down, is this right type question. I don't think it has to be. But as far as resources, I'd love to have anybody's ideas and a little bit of, if you will, research-based, effective ticket out the doors or wrap-ups instead of a warm-up.
One of the things that you and I discussed when we were doing our interview, and you had mentioned that, is that you would like for me to try to help you with some resources, is there is a popsicle stick formative assessment. I think it would work good in your class. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
When I was observing your class, how did you question the children? How did you question the students?
Just informal, just a call out.
You called out.
My procedures.
And what did they do?
Of me calling on them. Number one, don't raise your hand, which they still will do that, even though you've told them time and time again, I don't want you raising your hand. I want to call on you randomly. And of course, when a kid raises their hand and they're about to shake their arm off, you just feel like you owe it to them to call on them, because they maybe want to show off a little bit and let everybody else know that they know. But in my case, they most of the time want me to know that they know. And because that's kind of how I quiz them. Who knows this? And it's sort of, I sort of set the trap myself, and then I end up falling in it when I ask a question, who knows this? And, well, doggone, why did you ask me if you didn't want me to raise my hand and let you know that I knew it? So I sort of fall in my own trap a lot of times. But I mean, I'm excited about teaching math, and I love kids that love math as much as you and I do, and because that's all we do is math. So it's easy to want to call on a kid that's actually excited that they got it, or they feel like they have the right answer, and they know I'm not going to embarrass them or put them down. If they aren't correct, they know exactly how I handle it. I've never been one of those to embarrass a student. I always try and say, well, let's see if that's the correct way to think about that. Let's see if we can think about that a different way. And without them really knowing that I'm helping them solve the problem, I try and make them feel like they're solving the problem.
And you did a really good job of that on your checklist. That was one of the things I noticed, that you had a lot of positive comments to your students, and that definitely kept them engaged. I think every time we talk, it seems like we come back to that your students really want your approval. And I think you said that in different ways, it has led back to the same thing, that your students are seeking your approval.
Well, in nearly all my observations by administrators, that's one of the comments, one of my, if you will, one of the glows, is they always mention that I'm positive in nature, at how I respond to a student's answer or question. And I've never been one of these I always try and make them feel like they're right in some way or another. and maybe it's just one little point that they make is right, and I try and highlight that and say, you know, that what you said was really, really good and it was correct. Where we made a mistake was maybe just not thinking it all the way through as to what the correct response should be. But that's always been an administrator's comment on my observations, that they like the way I respond to students in their effort to get the problem right.
Well, I'd like to join them in saying it was a pleasure to watch how you responded to your students, because they definitely wanted your approval. And I think that goes back to what we talked about a while ago, that these students are seeking your approval, and that you have gotten that with the students that you have gotten to know well. And I definitely see us as being able to engage those other students by, what are you thinking? What are you thinking would engage the other students?
That's what I'm hoping that you're going to be able to help me figure out.
Well, if you had mentioned a while ago that you thought if you got to know the other students,
Well, that's
well
one
too.
way.
I think that's definitely one of the ways. One of the things that I had come up with when you had asked me to come up with some ways to help you is the popsicle stick. And you would take a popsicle stick and hand it out to all your students and have them write their first name on the popsicle stick, and you would put them in a cup. Well, you could just sort of rattle the cup a little bit when it came time to ask the question, and it gets everyone's attention. And they don't know who you're going to call on. So you would say the question first, so everybody's sitting, waiting, thinking that you're going to call on them. Don't call their name first.
That's another bad habit, I guess, that I've got to break in this. Because a lot of times I'll call on the kid first, and I'll say, all right, I want you to be thinking about this, and then I want you to come up and explain it. Well, that sort of is a bad habit of mine. It gets the other ones, kind of takes the guard off of them. And that is just something I've got to revisit and learn how to do a little more effectively, instead of picking my prey first and then letting everybody else off the hook. They can sort of sit back and maybe not be quite as engaged. And that's something, the popsicle stick, if I can get in the habit of asking my question, formulating my thoughts before I call on the student, and then that's, I see that as something I can clearly do.
Well, we could fix the popsicle sticks. We could put them in a little metal container so it would rattle, and that gets their attention. Then you would ask your question. Then you would pick a popsicle stick and read the name off. And at that time, everyone is waiting, and it is totally random. So they're not going to know who you're going to call on. And so they're all prepared for your answer. And if you want to try that the next time I come in, we can, do the observation sheet with you using the popsicle sticks. That's just one of many formative assessments that we can try to see if it's improving engagement. If you would like to do that.
That sounds like a good idea to me.
The other thing that we talked about is consistently using the ticket out the door. And so you said you are improving.
Well, I've been consistent so far this 9 weeks.
And that's been
1 day in a row. So I have a perfect record so far.
But we can keep working on that, correct?
I suspect we better.
All right. But do you think that's do you see that as being successful? How do you feel about our goal that we have set?
Well, if they know that I'm going to start having a ticket out the door on a consistent basis, they know they better be ready. They better be prepared. They better be on task, preparing for a ticket out the door that's going to kind of hold their feet to the fire. And I'm going to know that they don't know. And I think with the level of success I've had with them wanting me to feel like that they know, I don't feel like that many of them will want to disappoint me. And I just I think that's one of my weaknesses.
I think that's awesome as a teacher that you can say that they don't want to disappoint you. I think that says a lot about you as a teacher. Um, and definitely something that you can build upon. With your worrying about the engagement, if you already have them wanting to please you, I see, you keeping them engaged is.
Well, I made it clear from day one. I said, I have a job, you have a job. My job is not going to be successful if you don't do your job, and your job is not going to be successful if I don't do my job. And I require 100% effort, if nothing else. You're going to try. Even if you don't understand, you're going to try and figure out why you don't understand and what it is you don't understand about what we're doing. These concepts they're trying to learn in 7th grade are pretty difficult. So
they are. They truly are.
They're and I'm telling them it's way above what I was doing at their age. That it's just incredible what they can do, and if they can master the standards we're trying to teach them, they're just going to be prepared for life. I try to make them all feel like these are like the most important standards on earth, and that they can't function in adult life without learning this. And to a point that's true, because 7th grade standards are the most realistic and real life standards that there are to me.
I think so too.
Because they're just very practical and just part of nearly everyday life, except for a few of the standards. But for the bulk of them, like what we're on now, definitely it's just part of their real life.
I agree completely. I watched a video a few weeks ago, and it was eye-opening to me. And what it was is someone went through a day of a student's life, and they went in the school, and they were as if they were the student, and they walked through that student's day. And what do you see students doing most of the time in your classroom?
I've sort of changed my routine a little bit this year from previous years, and you've probably seen them. I line them up outside my room, and I say, that's your time. I give you right up till bell. You do your little bit of chatting, and if you got a little bit of gossip you need to spread your gossip. And when bell rings, you on my clock, and it's my time then. And it is definitely something I'm going to use in the future. Is lining them up outside, giving them that 3 or 4 minutes, because normally we rush them right on in our room, have a seat, and get busy. Well, they need just a little bit of downtime. They've got something hot on their lips they need to get rid of, and make sure everybody knows what's going on and attending to everybody else's business. So, yeah, that one routine has made a lot of difference, because they know when they come in my room, it's time to close your mouth and look at the board, see what your assignment is, and get in the game, and let's start going.
Once they come in your classroom, what do they do for pretty well the hour and a half?
They clearly know my procedure. My routine is for them to come in, look at the bell ringer, do the bell ringer, which can take anywhere from 10 minutes to a half an hour, depending on the level of understanding of the previous day's work. If it's something fairly easy to comprehend, then the bell ringer's about 10 minutes, and we're off of it and on to our next procedure, which is to get out homework, and they know that I'm just as likely to ask them to put it on a piece of paper and pass it up. And I have a little procedure that I do that if they understand completely, I want them to fold it hot dog style. And if they're a little bit confused and maybe want some reinforcement on it, I get them to fold it hamburger style. So I immediately know when they pass it up to the front of the room, I can look at the stack and I can see, well, most of these are hot dog, most of them are hamburger, and I know what my next step needs to be. And if it's reinforced that concept, then that's what we do. But
That's a really neat
and,
trick.
and if I notice that a lot of them have folded it hot dog, I'm sorry, hamburger, I'm not going to grade it. If they're confused and they're identifying their own weakness and they're letting me know that hey, I'm not sure about this yet. So that's our little routine for that. And
That's
then
a great.
they
That's a
know it's
great
on
little
to
assessment.
homework. If I get a lot of hot dogs passed in, then we just usually go over the answers. And if I get a bunch of hamburgers passed in, then we go in depth into those problems. And the next day if I ask those same questions or ask them about that same homework, I won't get a bunch of hamburgers in. And they sort of get a kick out of that. So
What percent of the time would you say that they remain in their desks in your classroom?
about 99%, because they know I'm going. They know I'm going. They know I'm going to come a little bit unglued because I don't like anybody roaming around in my room at all. In day one, I set that in place, and you don't get up in my room. I'm going to say most of the time, that 1% of the time, they've usually raised their hand, and maybe I didn't acknowledge them right away. They had some paper that they need to get rid of, or something that was just sort of on their mind, and they, for some reason, a ball of paper in their hand is just very distracting to them, and they can't put it on the floor either. They got to get rid of it. But anyways, that's sort of our procedure, and then we go on to the lesson for the day, and it's posted on the agenda what we're going to be doing, and they know that before they get out of me, the ones that need their agenda signed, that they better have that homework written down in their agenda and waiting on me to initial that I don't write their lesson for them. I don't write their assignment down. They know, and they know to put their finger exactly where they want me to initial it, and that works pretty effectively.
I'd like to share this article with you because it was eye-opening to me as I read it, where he walked through a day in a student's life, and your classroom sounds like your typical classroom where they walk in the door and they sit down and do their work. But when you do that for 4 or 5 class periods a day, they have sat all day long. And the article was saying how tired that students are, and just any movement in the classroom, being able to get up and do any hands-on or doing any little activity, that engages them a little bit more because they get to move, because they have sat through so many classes. And I think, I was just thinking as I was reading that, how awesome it would be for me to walk through one of my students' day and just see what it's like to just sit. Because as teachers, we're up moving around. We're constantly moving around, so we don't have time to get tired. But the article was fairly eye-opening, so I will share that article with you and let you read it and see if if it holds anything that you would like to think about.
I'm just not a big person on. I don't look. And that's probably something I need to work on. I'm just not a big person on a lot of movement in my room. I don't know why. Maybe it's my special ed background that what things can go wrong if you let students up and about a little bit too much. It gets almost to be a routine to them. They feel like that's going to become part of the class routine as they get up to move around a lot. So I'm
even a
I'm
structured activity.
I'm
If we
still
came
just
up
a
with
little
structured
bit.
activity.
I'm a little bit reserved. I'm going to use that very, very sparingly.
Okay.
I won't be very receptive to a lot of movement at all, especially in math. Now, if it were something where I could incorporate 4 or 5 things into a lesson, but usually my lessons are fairly concise, and there's not a lot of. I just have to work on that. That's something that we'll definitely have to talk about a lot and convince me that that's going to be effective to keeping them engaged. Transition while seated, I'm pretty strong at that, but I'm not sure how strong I'll be at transitions with movement.
Okay, well, we have plenty that we can work on. Just to go back and recap a little bit, your initial goal was my 7th grade math students will be more engaged as assessed by their daily tickets out the door, and their grade on the 3rd benchmark assessment will increase by 20% during the 2014-2015 school year. Now, at this point, I would say you have 3 different options here that you might want to consider. We can keep that same goal and keep working towards that goal if you're happy with that. We can add to that goal, or we can just develop an entirely new goal. So, how do you feel about the goal? And do you?
Well, I think that goal number 1 is going to be effective, and number 2, I think it's going to be attainable. I think it's something that's measurable. So, I'm good with that. I don't want to go in and change a lot in my class routine. I don't think that's good. That comes back.
So you're happy with the goal that we've set?
I don't want to change a whole lot. I want to change one thing at a time, and if
that
that works and is effective and accomplishes the result that we want, I'm receptive to other changes, such as a little more movement in my room.
So to recap, let's talk about, you said you would like to stick with 1 or 2 changes, which I think is very admirable.
I'm not going to change much at all.
Alright, so let's recap as to, would you like to try the popsicle stick? Would you like to try the consistent ticket out the door?
Well, popsicle sticks, yeah, I guess. I don't know much about it, but it sounds like it's a randomly generated pick, and maybe it'll keep them a little bit more on their toes, a little bit more involved and engaged. Consistent ticket out the door. It's something that I've been preached to about before, and most of my observers understand what I'm doing. But I do understand I'm leaving maybe some of the kids at a little bit of a loss, not tracking and being sure that they at least have a little bit of a grasp of what we're trying to accomplish for that day. And if it becomes a routine, it can be a win-win. I just don't see it as a waste of time or a lose at all. I see it as a win-win.
Well, I'm really excited. So we're going to stick with your goal, if that's correct, and we're going to just tweak it a little bit, like try the popsicle stick and the consistent tickets out the door.
As long as that's the only 2 things.
And those are the only 2 things?
I just don't want to change a lot in my routine.
That's
I don't
good.
feel like
that's good, because that gives me something direct.
Give us something to base our information off of, our new data. And at least we can isolate and see if those 2 things are efficient and effective.
And without disturbing our data at all, I think you getting to know your students better, a little along.
Informally.
I think that will just add to the mix.
Some kids don't want everybody in the classroom to know that their dad's in jail and their mama's probably going to jail too. So they're kind of protective. And you can't crowd them in front of other kids. I don't think that'd be very professional.
True. So, so we are good for our next observation, correct?
I give it a little bit of time, I hope. I don't know what time frame you're looking at, but I'd like to try and get myself trained to those TODs and tie them a little bit in with your data. So
well, it was a joy to come to your classroom, and I look forward to observing you again. I will definitely get you the article, and I will also come to your class, and we will get that popsicle stick going so you guys can try that. And again, I just want to thank you for letting me come and observe your classroom. Do you have any other comments?
No.
Thank you.